This is the second stage in learning about deponent verbs. These are verbs which, as you know, look passive but have an active force. And we have already seen them in the video about the first and second conjugation. Last time, we met the first and second conjugation. The first conjugation is based on an A stem, conor, conaris, conator, and the second conjugation is based on an E stem, vereor, vereris, veretur, and so on. So on this occasion, we're going to meet the third conjugation, which is based on consonant stems, and the fourth conjugation, which is based on the I stem. There is something called the mixed conjugation, which is really a mixture of the third and fourth. Our model for the third conjugation is loquor, I speak. Now notice that because the stem ends with a consonant, loque, we need vowels, little filler vowels, to get us to the personal endings. And we can see that we've got O and E and I and then U in the third person plural in the present to get us there. Loquor, loqueris, loquitur, and so on. In the future, you'll need to remember that the third conjugation and the fourth conjugation in the active ends am, es, et, emus, etis, ent. And that's mirrored in the passive form, albeit an active meaning, ar, eris, etur, emur, emini, entur. And for the imperfect tense, we need a vowel to get us from the consonant stem ending, loque, to the imperfect ending, bar, baris, bator, and that vowel here is an E. For the passive, as usual, we have a perfect active participle, in this case locutus, with the verb to be, sum es est, sumus estis sunt. The present of the verb to be keeps the verb in the perfect force being supplied by the perfect active participle, that idea of completion, and so means I spoke. Correspondingly, for the future perfect tense, the future of the verb to be, ero, eris, erit, and so on, is added to the perfect active participle and means I will have spoken. And the imperfect of the verb to be, eram, eras, erat, eramus, and so on, is added to the perfect active participle, and that pushes it further back into the past, I had spoken. So as we can see, the third conjugation deponent verb follows a pattern that's pretty familiar to us. The differences from the first and second conjugation are principally in the singular side, that is to say the left-hand side on the screen, and especially in the future, where we have the vowels to indicate the future tense. So having met the first three conjugations now, we can move on to the fourth conjugation, which will have its stem ending in I. Our model for the fourth conjugation is the verb partior, which means I share. Now notice that the stem ends in an I, so we're back to a vowel stem, and that I is present in the left-hand column, showing its permanence, and the endings are added to it. In the present, we have partior, partiris, and partitur, and so on. Notice that just like the third conjugation, in the third person plural of the present, we have untur as our ending. The future tense of the fourth conjugation, just as with the third conjugation, is based on a vowel change. So we have ar, eris, etur, emur, emini, entur, all added to that consistent I stem parti. And the imperfect tense, just as with the third conjugation, here in the fourth conjugation, adds an E to get us to bar, baris, batur, and the rest. And that E is in addition to the consistent I ending of the stem. With the perfect tenses, as before, we have a perfect active participle that gives us that perfect or completed force with the verb to be in a range of tenses. Here in the ordinary perfect tense, we have the verb to be in the present, sum es est, sumus estis sunt, but together with the perfect active participle, that simply means I shared. Predictably, the future of the verb to be puts the perfect active participle now as an idea of completion in the future, I will have shared, and the pluperfect of the verb is formed by adding the imperfect of the verb to be to the already historic, already in the past, perfect active participle, thus rendering it I had shared. And so we can see that the fourth conjugation shares many, many patterns with the third conjugation, particularly in the future where there is a vowel change to indicate the change to that tense, and in the imperfect where there is the E vowel to get us to the bar, baris, batur imperfect ending. And then generally the other patterns are consistent across all the conjugations of these deponents, and similarly with their respective passive verbs. So we have run through the four main conjugations of these deponent verbs, first, second, third and fourth. There is something known as the fifth or mixed conjugation, but in truth it functions like this. For the single word forms, the mixed conjugation is essentially like the fourth conjugation in that it retains the I of the stem, and we can see that in morior, moriar and moriebar. For the compound forms, those involving two words, the perfect forms, the mixed conjugation essentially follows the pattern of the third conjugation, having often a quite irregular perfect active participle and then adding the verb to be. And we can see that exemplified in mortuus or mortua sum ero eram. There is a subtopic worth mentioning here, and these are intransitives in the passive. Now, intransitive verbs are verbs which don't naturally take an object, a direct object. You wouldn't think they could be used in the passive, but they can. For example, the verb pugno, I fight, in Latin, does not take a direct object. I fight with the enemy, I fight against the enemy, but I don't fight the enemy directly in Latin. But that doesn't stop it having passive forms. The verbs there, pugnatur, pugnabatur, and pugnatum est, all mean, respectively, there is fighting, there was fighting, there was a moment of fighting. And you can even add an agent. A militibus here means by the soldiers. So pugnabatur a militibus means there was fighting done or undertaken by the soldiers. Similarly, with persuadeo, this verb takes the dative. It means I persuade in English and takes a direct object, but in Latin it takes the dative because the idea in the Roman mind was that you were urging something upon someone. You were putting your persuasion to them. So we can see in Latin that it's senatoribus persuadeo, I persuade the senators, tibi persuadeo, I persuade you. You might not expect to find the passive form then, but you can. Persuadetur, persuadebatur, persuasum est mean respectively there is persuasion going on, there was persuasion going on, there was momentarily persuasion going on. And you can even add an agent, arte in this case, by you, and you can even have the indirect object back in again in the dative, in this case mihi. So the middle line there, mihi persuadebatur arte, means there was persuasion going on by you upon me. That's a more convoluted way of saying you were persuading me. That then wraps up deponent verbs. We've seen across two presentations that deponent verbs are passive in form but active in meaning. We have seen that these passive form verbs follow all the patterns that we would expect of the first and second conjugations paired together quite naturally, and the third and fourth conjugations also paired together quite naturally, and that the mixed conjugation simply combines aspects of the third and fourth. We've also seen that it is possible to have passive form verbs formed from intransitive verbs where you might not necessarily expect a passive, and this really gives us an impersonal verb that indicates that an action is going on.